Welcome to Avoice, a voice for creators. I'm your host, Daniel Norton. This week, we're going to talk a little bit about taking your art and making money with it, basically going pro, if you will. I've also got a great call from Marco about printing and the physicality of photography, and an email from Mark about a portrait exhibit in Australia. So let's get to the show. As I've mentioned before, reviews and ratings are really important for growing a small podcast like this one. So if you guys could take the time to do that, that would be great. And this week, I'm going to read a review from Pete C. 5 stars. Huge fan of this podcast. It's a great insight into the mindset of a photographer from somebody who's been doing this a long time. The advice in here could help people find a much clearer path as a photographer. I've always liked Daniel's manner when presenting for Adorama. He comes across as quiet and considered when everyone else is shouting. Great work. Thanks, Pete. Yeah, I think that sometimes we have to shout, right, to get ourselves heard, but maybe it's if we listen a little harder, we can hear those that aren't shouting, and that might be where some good information comes from. So I really appreciate it. And like I said, if you guys like the show, or I guess if you don't, and you want to put a review, that would be great. I read one every week, so you could be featured next week. This week, I want to talk a little bit about taking your creative process, your art, if you will, and turning it into a business, or at least something that can bring in income. So whenever I'm looking for anything, typically on YouTube, I will, type in something like iPad apps. And what you'll find is half the videos are how to make money with your iPad apps. So I know that there's definitely a lot of people, including myself, that want to use our talents or our hobbies to create an extra income source, or possibly our main income source. And this is, I could go through the 9 ways to do this and step through, and I've done videos about this where I talk about that kind of stuff. But here, due to the nature of the podcast, I want to keep it a little more philosophical. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of taking your creative endeavor, your art, as I said, whether it be photography, it could be videography, it could be a writer, you might want to do a podcast, right? These things, and turning it into something that could be, if not your career, maybe some kind of extra income. So I think the first step for this really is to consider, why do we want to do this? Are we doing it because we've heard that saying, oh, if you do what you love, you don't work a day in your life? Are we doing it because we really need an extra income source? Are we doing it because we don't like the job that we're in now? What draws us to want to make our living or a side living from the thing that we love, the art, the creation? It's important to consider this from the point of view of, if you are creating art and you want to create art, and you're creating and you're putting things out there in the world to help people, or for whatever the reason is that you're doing it, or to showcase a certain thing that you want to show, right? A knowledge that you have, or things you've experienced, or whatever reason you're creating what you're creating, that should in itself be enough, in my opinion. Meaning that any money, any career you make from it is going to be icing. If you go into this thinking, I've got to only work, I want to make money doing it, it's a very different mindset, and you can do that, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But I think it helps a lot if you have the mindset that you just really want to do this anyways, and if it can also be your job, all the better. And so when I finished college, I went to school for photography. People often ask me that. And I went to an art school. So not really knowing, I'll say, later, you have that after school, you look back, you're like, not really knowing that there were commercial photography schools. I went to an art school and studied photography, visual design, technically, with a focus in photography. But anyways, and what I did after college was, just because I had worked my way through and I was working all through college, I ended up in a pretty good job. And this job was well paying, especially for my age. Most of the people in the job had a very different degree than me, but I just, you do a good job, you get promoted, kind of thing. And I found myself, I remember very specifically, somebody from the office was like, oh, my sister wants to do some modeling, and you, a photographer, right? You do some shots. And I did. And I realized that that was the first time I had really picked up my camera in a while, like probably close to a year. I had been focusing so much on the job, making money, moving forward, having a new car, that kind of stuff, that I kind of had put the photography down. And it made me think, oh man, do I really even want to be a photographer? And I started to really think about it a lot, and I started shooting more again on my own. And I realized, yeah, that was kind of what was missing from my life. I had been so busy, like kind of living, if you will, that I kind of missed the thing that I was missing, if that makes sense. Missed the thing that I was missing. I didn't realize even that I was missing it until I had it again. And at this point, I decided I need to be a photographer, and this is in me. It's part of what I need to do. I'm so much happier now that I'm shooting again. And my thought was, because I was relatively young, was that I could always get a job later in life, right? So I know this is a bit of a different story if you're already somewhere and you have a career and things. But so what ended up happening was I just set a date and I said, I'm going to quit my job and become a photographer. And the reason why I'm telling this story is, I'm getting to it, is that when I moved, and one of the first photographers I ever worked for, we were just talking, I was a photo assistant, and this is once I moved, it was a commercial photographer. And I remember she said to me, because we were talking, I was explaining the job I had, and that was decent income, whatever, blah, blah. And then she said to me, you should call them back right now and try to get that job back. Because if you think you're going to do well and make a lot of money as a photographer, then that's not the reason to be in it. And I said, well, that's not the reason why I'm in it. I'm in it because I want to be a photographer. I don't mind eating ramen noodles, the little 49-cent ones, or, cans of soup, and just getting by, as long as I'm doing the thing I really love to do. And she was like, okay, well, that's the right attitude then. Because if you think you're going to make that money that you were making there as a photographer right away, or ever possibly, that's possibly the wrong attitude to have. Now, I get some people, especially people that are very into marketing, and going, oh, that's not true. And if you do, okay, if you are a very strong marketer, you probably can make money, at least for a certain amount of time, doing almost anything. So that's a very different skill set, though, than just being a photographer or being a painter or being somebody who writes poetry or stories, short stories, any kind of graphic designer. This is very different than that. You're creating something as a photographer because you want to create, right? You want to express. In my sense, I was exploring something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed fashion. I really liked how it was a way to make a statement, and how what we wear and what we do really is a way that we showcase that. People can see us, and they can see what we're wearing, and that makes a statement. And that was very important to me. And I wanted to do that through the photography. I wanted to show that these people that had something to say, one of the ways that they said it was through what they wore. And that was kind of my basis of being a fashion photographer. And the clothing, the nature of it tells the story, right? Who are these people? And while I get that, you can't judge a book by its cover, right? That whole thing. But at the same time, when you see somebody, it's hard not to look at them, see what they're wearing, see how they're interacting, and have some kind of an idea. And this is what we're doing as fashion photographers. We're creating this surface level story, right? People in a fashion photo aren't any deeper than what's on the surface. I mean, the actual people are, obviously, but I'm saying in the context of the photo. So it's a very interesting way to make either statements about society or whatever, In any case, perhaps that's a whole other thing. If you're interested in that, if you're interested in kind of my philosophy or the philosophy of fashion, let me know. Send me a message. You can, there'll be information in the show notes on how to do that. You can send me a message on Anchor. Let me know, or email me, or tweet at me, Daniel Norton. I'll put all that stuff in the notes. Daniel P. Norton, actually, on Twitter. You can let me know if you want to, talk fashion, because I will definitely talk fashion. So, anyways, what's funny? I want to tell another story about that. What's funny about that is that you oftentimes you see fashion photographers, and there's all different types, right? This is a different podcast. Let me just say that some fashion photographers don't dress in, designer clothes, and some do. And we'll leave it at that for now. But let's just keep moving on here. So, first of all, why do you want to do this, right? So we're getting back to this idea. If it's because you hate your job, that might not be the right reason to do it, to be honest with you. And the reason why I say that is because it's not a guarantee that you're going to make money doing the art. It's really hard, actually. It's very, very difficult. And the whole "you'd ever work a day in your life" thing, I'm going to talk about that in a second, is really misleading, we'll say. It's very, very hard to make a living in the arts. And to put yourself out there to do that is taking a huge risk. So if you have a steady job and you're making decent money, even if you don't like your boss or you're not happy with your job or it takes too much of your time, leaving that completely to pursue an art is incredibly risky. And you have to make sure that you are willing to basically leave that lifestyle. If you're just doing it because you think, oh, I'll just sidestep into this, it's difficult. Now, if you're at your job or if you're not working at all, right, and every day you're thinking about the art and you're doodling, if you're maybe an illustrator, you're thinking about photos, you're doing photo editing or whatever you're doing in your spare time, and this is an obsession, and all you're doing is thinking about it, not because you hate what you're doing, but because you need to do that thing. That's a little bit different. And I think that's where I was. I kind of forgot, which was weird because I got wrapped up in everything. But then once I started touching the photography again and bringing it into my life, then it was just an obsession. It was, so there's, you ever see the Muppet movie? There's a song, Kermit the Frog. I'm assuming everybody knows who the Muppets are. He sings this song, The Rainbow Connection, and he talks about one of the, I don't know, I might be misquoting this, but the general idea is, it's something that you're supposed to be. Like if you feel like there's something inside you and you know that you're supposed to be that, you know that you're supposed to be the photographer or the writer or whatever. And this is who you are. This is your, I hate to use the word destiny, but this is what you should be doing. And if you're not doing it, you're never going to be the person that you are supposed to be. This is the position that many of us are in when we want to create art as a living. It's just something, it's like I've talked about this before. When you're a photographer, and I'll say that because I'm a photographer, you are a photographer, whether you do it for a living, whether you shoot pictures every day. If the way that you define yourself, if somebody asks you, about yourself, and the first thing you start talking about, or one of the first things is that you are a photographer, then that's you, right? And now to turn this into an income source might be a great option for you. And what we do here is we need to be realistic. And again, I'm going to talk about that whole never work a day in your life in a second. And really figure out, okay, I'm supposed to be a photographer. Now, how am I going to do it? And this is where the work comes in. Now, I'm going to take a little sidestep and say, and I kind of hinted at it already, it might be that you are just really good at marketing, right? You might think to yourself, hey, I could sell myself no matter what. I could make this work. And I'm going to be the person that, and I can identify trends, and I have an artistic bent. So I can say, okay, I know that, dancing on TikTok is trending, and I can do that because, I'm artistic enough to know how to make it happen. And I know it's trending, and I'll do it for that reason. Not because I love dancing on TikTok, but because I know that that's going to get me views, which is going to get me notoriety, which is hopefully going to get me clients. That's why I'm doing it. This person that has that marketing skill, by the way, that's awesome skill to have. You could be doing anything, right? But you like this art thing, so why not do that? That's great. Because those skills of the marketing is kind of what you're going to need, even if you're not that person, which is many of us who are artists, right? A lot of us create and we just kind of sit there on top of it because we don't know what to do with it. What we really have to do is get ourselves out there. And one thing I often recommend, I think I made a video about this a couple years ago, actually, where I talked about now's one of the best times to be in business for yourself. There's lots of resources. There's lots of ways you can do it. And one of the best things we can do as an artist is to do it part-time. Bring it in as a second income. See if you really like doing client work, or if you can handle putting prints up for sale and having people not buy them, right? Because when you're showing your friends and family, they love your images. But when you put the pictures up for sale, when nobody buys them, that can really be heavy on the ego, right? So doing it part-time, thinking about a way to kind of transition is often a really great option for us. We can look at potential situations. So I'm going to go photography because this is the type of thing that I'm more experienced with. And we can look for ways that we can be weekend photographers, right? We could shoot, let's say, portraits of students for their school pictures. We could shoot weddings. We could shoot engagement pictures. We could shoot, pregnancy photos. We could go and shoot, if we're into sports or wildlife, we could go on. So sports, you might go to like some of the local, like sports teams, not meaning like the professional ones, but like with children, and shoot those and try to get contracts to do that for small amounts where you can just kind of show up and do it without a lot of credentials, a way to build a portfolio, a way to build connections. You could go to some local parks or zoos and make a deal with them and say, hey, I'd like to photograph your wildlife. You can start to do these things as small assignments, and you're not looking to make a living from it, so you can basically come in wherever you need to. Meaning that if a local zoo says to me, hey, can you work for a week and photograph all these things? Because I do this for my living and I have to support myself with it, my price is got to be a certain place. When you're first starting, and by no means am I saying you should work for free, you can be more flexible, right? If somebody has a small budget, you can probably work within the budget because you don't need that money. And that's a great place to be. As long as you have your regular income coming from your job, even if it's not a job that you love, that will allow you to be more picky about the jobs that you choose. Now, jumping back to me when I first started, because I just took the plunge, because I was like, I'm doing this, and I just moved, I had to do a lot of things that I didn't really like doing. I obviously I'm doing photography, I like doing it, but there were a lot of things that weren't, I wanted to shoot fashion. But, if a client came to me and they needed a product photographed, I could do it, and I had the equipment and I needed the money, so I did it. Now, in a way, I think this is a good way to be, and I've talked about this a little bit before. It's good to be well-rounded. I'm glad that I did those things, but at the same time, if I had had a steady income from another source, I could have just strictly focused on what I really wanted to do, which may have made my acceleration through the fashion process, like getting the portfolio together and stuff, faster. I definitely know people who had decent jobs that could then rent designer dresses and hire makeup artists and do all these things for every single test shoot they did. Whereas a lot of times I had to be more scrappy because I couldn't spend $1,000 to shoot a picture if I wasn't 100% sure it was going to be in my book, even like a test shoot, right? So, so it's sometimes having that basic source of income is really useful. So what I would say is identify why you really want to do it. And if it's because you need to put your things out there and you want to be out there, and I think that's a good reason, then start doing it as a side business. Bring it in a little bit at a time. Make mistakes business-wise when you don't need that money, right? Make mistakes where, I've known people that have worked for advertising agencies when they first started working, gave all these estimates and stuff, and then realized that they were going to lose money or make almost no money on the deal. They didn't realize there were all these extra costs that they didn't put in there. And then all of a sudden, now their $5,000 day rate is becoming $300, and they're putting in, a week's work before the job and some work after. And it's you're basically not making any money on this job. This can put you in a bad position. So having some kind of income so that you don't need that money is super useful. That being said, if you want to pursue advertising photography, it's probably not going to be preferable for the advertising agency when you go, well, I have a job 9 to 5. So can we shoot this on Sunday? No, they're going to want you to shoot it when they want you to shoot it. They want a quote professional photographer. So the other approach to this, which is one that you probably hear a lot about when going in business in general, is you got to save money. Get yourself set up so that you've got a buffer, 6 months or so that you can leave what you're doing, give it a full chance, basically. Ideally, possibly you're working for a job that'll give you a leave of absence, which would be amazing, right? This isn't always the case, though. So again, you got to really want it, because when you leave that job that's paying for your mortgage, paying for that new car, you got to know that you might lose all that stuff if you're not successful in the business, or at the very least, lose all the savings that you put together, right? So again, it's got to be something that you're supposed to be, that you're meant to do. You have to really feel this strongly. Now, just jumping back to the kind of doing it as a side thing or starting off small, this can also have its own set of problems. One can be that it's really hard to change course when we're moving in a certain direction. That is, you're making, and again, I'm just going to throw numbers out here. These aren't obviously real numbers, but it's just for an example. You're making $100 a month doing your job, which pays for your mortgage and it pays for your car, and you're doing well. And then you realize that, wow, I'm using all my weekends up and I'm only making an additional $10 a month by doing this photography thing. So then when somebody calls you with the $1 job, you're just like, I don't really feel like doing that this weekend. You know what? I'm not available. And little by little, you stop doing it. And it can be really hard to stay on course. If you really want to do it, if it's really something you're meant to be, you will push through it. Here's an example. I had a friend who was a photographer, an art photographer, really good art photographer, actually. And he wanted to get more into commercial photography. He lived in Pennsylvania. And of course, I live in New York. And he was like, I would love to photo assist for you so I can learn more of the commercial stuff. And I was like, sure, of course. It pays this much. This is what we pay per job, whatever. He's like, okay. He worked for me on like several catalog jobs. Then one time we were just talking about something. And it turned out that he was literally losing money to come work these jobs because he was coming to New York on the train. He was staying in a hotel. He was taking the train back and he was making less money than it cost him to go. But from his point of view, because he had the regular job and he had vacation days so he could take off days to be available during the week, he was learning. It was like school for him and it was worth the investment. He didn't look at it like, oh man, I make a bunch of money in my other job and I'm losing money to do this. Why would I do it? No, he looked at it as, I really want to do this and I really want to get into the photography industry. And this is one way I can do it. And in, Pennsylvania where he was living, there wasn't really, I know there's Philadelphia, but there wasn't really the market that we have in New York. They couldn't do the things that, that we do in New York. Not to, be like New York, but, New York's a huge market. So it was worth it for him. And again, he basically worked for nothing. I felt bad. I was like, I'm not going to use you anymore because I don't want you to be losing money. And he was like, no. So yeah. So, you got to really want to do it, right? You got to really put yourself in the position where like, it's super important. And again, you can do that if you have another source of income or if you've saved money up. It's hard to get off that track of I'm comfortable, but is comfortable your ultimate goal? That's what we've got to consider here. If your ultimate goal is to just be comfortable and make a decent living, perhaps doing your art for your living is not what you want to do. Instead, what you want to do is do it as art, as something you can share and not worry about it. And that's 100% okay. You don't need to be a quote professional in your art for you to be amazing, for you to love it, for you to inspire people, for you to make changes in people's lives. You can just do it because you love it. Let's talk now about never working a day in your life. Okay. I think that phrase comes from the idea that you'll always be happy to do the work that you need to do if the work is something that you really want to do, that you're inspired by it. It's not that it's not work, quoting, because work is work, right? When we think about work, work is the thing that has to be done for us to make the money, for us to do the thing. Hobby is like something you do, you often spend your money on, right? You do just purely for entertainment. When you mix what you love with work, it becomes this interesting combination. Because, for instance, I love having a model or subject on my set where I'm making a photo of them. I love interacting with them. I love talking about ideas. I love looking at the images after. I don't love doing my taxes. I don't like carrying tons of equipment to locations. I don't like marketing constantly to make sure that I can get those clients to come to my studio. These are not things that I love, but they're part of the job. So that means that that is work. And I'm working when I'm doing those things. All of it's work really, but the work that is the art crafting of the art doesn't feel as much like work, except when I get a subject that's really difficult, or I'm really under pressure, or I have to do something outside my normal wheelhouse, but I need to do it because my business needs to make money. So it's still work. So never think that once you start doing the thing you love, that it's just going to be like, oh, I'm just having fun all the time. If you really want to be successful, it's going to be work. It's going to be a lot of hard work. It's going to be incredibly rewarding work. It's going to be fulfilling work. It's going to be work that you love, but it's still work. If you want to transition from a creator that creates for the love of it and doesn't worry about money to one that creates for the love of it and worries about money, you just need to keep in mind that it is going to be hard work and it's going to be hard to break off that path. When I quit my good job, and I had the buffer thing, right? I had months of money. I actually thought I was going to work right away. I'd read a bunch of books. It was like, oh, how to make money as a photographer. And yeah, it was a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. Let me just say that. And yeah, it was very difficult to do it. And what's funny is I mostly made money as a photo assistant at first, which is common for the commercial industry. And then my first year of shooting full time after stop assisting, I made less money than I made the previous year as an assistant. So again, I took a drop because I wanted to shoot full time and not assist. Because ultimately the goal for me was to say, I am a photographer and mean that about my entire life, not just my hobby, but my work, my kind of existence, right? Everything was tied into the fact that I was a photographer. It's what I did all the time. It's what I do all the time. That may or may not be for you. And I think some dabbling, again, little weekend work job stuff, assisting for somebody, trying things out is a good way to know if that's true or not. You may think, wow, it would be amazing to just be a full-time illustrator or writer or whatever, but you may find as you start doing it that it's not all it's cracked up to be. And you might find it's even better than you could have imagined. So it really depends on you. Is this right for you? What are the steps? You could go through the 6 best things to do, but what I will tell you is the most important thing here is to understand that it's going to be work. Understand that you're not going to necessarily be successful immediately, but if you stick with it, and if you truly love doing it, and you're doing it for the love of it, you will find some success. I can virtually guarantee that to you. I'd like to thank Adorama for sponsoring the show this week. As always, you guys can support them by going to adorama.com to pick up any of your audio, video, photo, computer stuff. Also, if you check out adorama.com/create no matter what, there's always contests going on where you can win a lot of free gear, and also just kind of inspiration to help you kind of create and keep motivated. Okay, we have a call this week from Marco, so let's hear what he has to say.
Hi Daniel, this is Marco Coutin speaking from London. Daniel, your podcasts and your YouTubes are excellent. I have learned a lot from them, and well, I just wanted to contribute a little bit with yours, with this Avoice. I have been looking at the photography for a long time, and in the past we used to print everything, and that gave a special taste to the images. Now we see everything on screen. Don't you think that has changed a lot of how we perceive photography? I would like if you can, give some insights on that particular subject.
Wow, that's a really great point and subject. It probably could be an entire podcast, but what I'll do here is I'll talk about it a little bit, and then maybe if I have more to say, I'll dip my toe in there a little bit later as well. So yeah, I think that it has changed a lot. I can think the first thing I thought of when you said print everything is I thought of my aunt, who was the kind of my inspiration when I was a child. She was like the family photographer, if you will. And she would get doubles and triples prints of everything, right, and hand them out. And even if the pictures were really bad, right, it's like you just got your doubles and your triples. So it created a whole lot of pictures that maybe people didn't care to have printed, but that was the only way to really see them. Whereas if you only print the what you maybe you consider the best pictures, that might make a printed picture more valuable. So I mean, I wonder if on some level it's different if people actually take the time to print, that is. So for instance, if I go out and I shoot, let's say 36 pictures, because that's what was on a roll of film, and I pick 2 or 3 that I like, and we're talking about digital now, and then I did print those out and I showed them in a physical form, I think they would feel really special. I do think there's something very special about having a physical piece of photo paper or whatever, inkjet paper, whatever it might be these days, in your hand, or hanging it on the wall, or these kind of things. And I could say, because I've gone long periods, like months and months, sometimes even a year, without printing anything, except for where they were published. And then you make a print. In fact, I just did a stream maybe 6 months ago for Adorama where they wanted to talk about printers, and I sent a bunch of stuff off to have it printed. And it was amazing to get the stuff printed that I hadn't printed before. It wasn't things that I really needed to print. It's been years since I've used a physical portfolio. Most people don't want it anymore, right? They don't want to have you walk in with a portfolio, at least not in the beginning, right? They want to look at your website. They want to look at these things. So there's a lot of advantages, I guess, to the modern world, as it would be. But you do lose a little bit, especially when you're talking about photography we do for ourselves. We'll call it art photography, for lack of a better word, where you are printing something because a landscape or a portrait or something that you created because you just wanted to create a beautiful image. And now you've got this nice 8x10 and you're going to show it to people, possibly hanging on your wall, or it's so you show it in a portfolio book, or you frame it and put it in a gallery show, something to that effect. It does change it. It changes it a lot. And I think there's both the good, which is that we don't get the, triple prints of the pictures that are somebody's finger in front of the lens, right? But it also means we very rarely see those really great pictures blown up, looking beautiful as an individual presented image. So I think you take the good with the bad there. And yeah, this probably could be a topic for a whole other podcast as I start thinking about it more. But my first thoughts are, I think it's great that we can share images. I think that the speed of seeing them is very good. But I also feel like maybe because of that, we skip past even the best images. Because if we look at things like Instagram, right, where people are putting up, I would imagine, their favorite or their best images, people are still just flipping through it. Whereas if you only showed people your one great picture out of 36 back in the film days and it was printed as an 8x10, I think people would have taken more time to really look at it. So that's kind of a basic touch on that. Thank you so much for your kind words and for calling in. I always appreciate it. If you guys have any thing you want to add to the show by calling in with some thoughts or questions about things I've talked about or things you'd like me to talk about, feel free. I will put information about that at the end of the show. And thanks, Marco. I received a really nice email from Mark the other day, and there's lots of information in here and some ideas and some inspiration, actually, of things I may talk about in future podcasts. But just so people have a chance to check it out, they mention that the National Gallery of Victoria, this is in Australia, is having an exhibit called Who Are You? I'll put a link in the description below. It basically has, you can see some of the art. It's got photography, it has paintings and various other things, and talking about the idea of, I guess, self-portraits and portraits in general, in different styles of them. So there's this is a very long email with lots of great information. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Some of it I'll probably touch on in later podcasts, but I want to mention that now because I don't know how long it will be there. So if you happen to be in Australia, or if you want to check out the website, I will put the link in the description below. If you've got questions or comments or want to hear your voice on the show, you can send me a message using the Anchor app. There's a link in the show notes below. You could also send me an email at @gmail.com. You could either attach a voice file and I'll play it here on the show, or you could send me a message and ask me to read it, and I will. Either way works for me. I really enjoy the back and forth conversation with everyone here. So thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.